Hi, welcome to my channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today I would like to talk about Bakhmut. Bakhmut. And as usually, I have an alternative view of the matter. So if you are interested, please continue watching. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is the famous or infamous Bakhmut battle. Now, I've talked many times about it. My so-called colleagues have talked a lot about it, speculated a lot of things, discussed a lot of things, and predicted a lot of things and so forth. And, well, most of the times I didn't agree with that. And if you watch most of my videos, then you know why. The point here is that the Bakhmut battle is mostly fought by the Wagner Group. And at this stage, one has to ask yourself, what is the Wagner Group in any case? Initially, at the start of the SMO, we heard they were a mercenary group, or a type of mercenary group. They are now getting all the support from the Russian military. When question asked, when Serovikin took over, did they incorporate them into the Russian army? They're giving them tanks, they're giving them artillery pieces and support. They're giving them all the finest weapons that they can have. And these guys are now, have been for the last 6 or more months involved in the Battle of Bakhmut. And then, well, progress was very slow. To be honestly, I don't know, because it seems to me the tactic has changed. They have tried to encircle Bakhmut. They have basically, effectively have done it, where there's only one road still for the Ukrainians to leave. And I believe that road is probably intentionally left open. And, you know, I had to ask myself many times, why didn't they encircle Bakhmut a long time ago? Why was it always a semi-frontal attack? And we all were told that Bakhmut is one of the most heavily defended fortified positions developed over 8 years by the Ukrainian army. And it has huge storage in the salt mines of weapons, etc. It is a logistical strategic point due to the roads that converge there and railways that converge there. And, well, it's supposed to be an important place. But suddenly the Ukrainians don't think anymore it's strategic. Everybody asks themselves, what is the strategic value of Bakhmut? And why are the Russians spending so much manpower and energy on Bakhmut itself? And why are the Ukrainians spending so much manpower and sacrificing men in the protection of Bakhmut? And actually nothing makes sense. And if you look at the photographs or videos about Bakhmut, that's mostly destroyed. Nearly looks like Mosul. So what is the big point about this whole story? Well, firstly, it's the Wagner Group that is attacking there. And if the Wagner Group is made out of volunteers or old prisoners that have a chance to repent and get their freedom back, then sacrificing those type of lives might make a little bit more sense than sacrificing ordinary troops. You could argue like that. Or you could argue that these guys are supposed to be better fighters, but I don't see how. Because they are supposed to be prisoners, so where did they get their military training from? So again, this whole question of training, you know, plays a big role. And who mans the tanks? Can't be the Wagner Group, it must be ordinary Russian troops. Tank troops. Who are the APCs? Who does the artillery? Not the Wagner Group. The Russians have to do that because they are the mostly trained people. But finally, after how many months of fighting, in the last month or so, finally they had a pincer movement, which they should have done a long time ago, because I don't see the point why you are bashing your head constantly against the same wall and achieving no results. And if you have an obstacle, then go around the obstacle. That is the logical thing to do. But then, and that is the big difference then, I read the article about the Potsdam strategy. And that's important. That's why I said I will always refer back to that paper and a video I made about it. This is not about conquering Bakhmut. This is not about advancing per se. We were supposed to have winter, and if there's winter, then there's a lot of mud, and then you cannot travel. So then why is there a fight? And that all this stuff tells you that all the stuff that we are fed is bullshit. If there's mud, then there shouldn't be any fighting. If the ground is frozen, then there must be a battle. If there's basically an advancement, then there should be casualties on both sides. The advancing group's supposed to have higher casualties. We don't hear that. More destruction of equipment. Both sides. It just doesn't gel. So coming back to the strategy. The biggest strategy that the Russians can do is to limit their offensive. It forces, according to the strategy, which I always agreed with, the Ukrainians to attack the Russian positions in order to recover the soil or the area. They have to do it because they have to regain it. And the Russians are more than happy to sit back and destroy these attacking forces, which is the best option. And that was also the strategy said, well, Ukrainians are going to lose men, but once they have lost this defensive line, the straightening of the line, which is at Karnia, and they have to retreat back to beyond the Dnieper River, they will have lost more or less half of their military. And maybe that is what's happening. I hate this word, this meat grinder story. So, this is the last time I'm going to mention it. But the continuous bombardment of the attacking forces, or the limited defensive forces of the Ukrainian, makes totally sense in the context of the military strategy of the Russians. They want to destroy as much as possible of the Ukrainian military on this current contact line. Once they feel they have destroyed enough and weakened enough the military, and maybe press them and put so much pressure on them that they are unorderly retreating, or even orderly retreating with whatever equipment they still have left, then this big ground offensive of the Russians will start. It will not depend on summer, or mud, or no mud, or frozen grounds, whatever. For me, the Russians are now sitting back, doing their destruction, which was the second aim of Putin, the demilitarization, and then they will have to advance. And if the Russians are advancing, and there is not insufficient, if it was a normal enemy, which was not decimated, then their flanks would have become vulnerable, and they had to be very orderly progress slowly in order to protect their flanks and bring up the supply lines and stuff like that. And as we have discussed in this, the area between Bakhmut and the Dnieper River is all open ground, open field, very, very few and little natural fortifications or places where you can put up an effective defense or counter-offense. And if you want to do a counter defense in that thing, then you need the equipment. But the Americans and Europeans are only piecewise supplying them with the necessary equipment. Not enough to really do what they need to do. They are constantly on a starving diet. So we hear Bakhmut. Bakhmut is not important per se. Bakhmut is not important. Yeah, the other reason why it's not important, go look at the map. Go look at the map and go read the scale, distance. You know, Russian 120 can fire, say, 20 kilometers. The 152 can fire anything between 30 and 40 kilometers. Then we have all the heavy artillery like the Smerch and the other rocket systems that can fire a lot more than 40 kilometers. Then you can look at what the Ukrainians have. They can also cover. So they're standing back far away from Bakhmut, both teams, and then they are supporting their infantry on the front, on the battlefield inside. And that's where they try to annihilate. And there's no reason for them to move, except for strategic purposes in terms of counter battery fire. You know, that is when they have to be wakey. But that's about what we are talking. So, now look at the map. Bakhmut, long time on the artillery fire, within range of artillery fire of the Russians. If there's an artillery fire, they can bombard the train stations and logistical hubs. If they can, in the range of the artillery, they can cover the roads, the supply lines. So everything was already covered. So I don't understand what is the big hoo-ha. It's only the physical occupation of the city that, by the infantry, that really was lacking. But until that happened, the Ukrainians lost a lot of forces and equipment. And that is what the Russians wanted to achieve. So because they're quite happy to sit there, stationary, to build up their defensive positions, fire at well-protected areas. Another thing that I saw is now dummies. The Ukrainians are employing dummy tanks and dummy artillery, and none of the HIMARS have been destroyed. It was all dummies. No, the Russians usually fired on the Ukrainian so-called dummies just after they fired because they located their fire position. So I'm not totally sure how you can dummy a real thing that just fired some rockets off. But in any case. So yes, the Russians have destroyed a number of HIMARS launchers. So surely the Russians also have their dummies and decoys. Being in a nice defensive positions, well-developed positions, trenches are well-fitted, not like hastily erected trenches where you stay in the mud, but well-fortified, well-laid out, supported, reinforced, you know, whatever is required. That's a nice defensive line. And why would you move unless it's totally necessary to move advance forward? Once that push forward comes, then, well, that's a different thing. But I don't see it happening now for the near future. Not until the Ukrainians have been weakened significantly. But again, that is also a debatable point because, again, if you look at some of the maps which show you the positions of the various Ukrainian armed forces, you will see that there are concentrations around Bakhmut, but there are significant other battalions distributed all over the front lines and in the rear and in the west and around Kiev. And, you know, there's still a lot of Ukrainian army still left. So, Bakhmut is a battle. And yes, it gives you sources for making videos like this. It gives you information. It gives you a topic to talk about, but not really much. There are other fightings on the front going on as well. There are other battles, smaller battles that are taking place. So, but nobody talks about that because there's no video entertainment value. It's not an entertainment. We're not dying, and that is bad. And I hate the idea, but sometimes, unfortunately, it's necessary. So this, in my opinion, it's a like a thing to talk about as a subject, not as a reality. But it's a tragedy actually playing off itself there. I know there are talks about that the Ukrainians have lost 200,000 men. The Russians have lost about 20,000 men. These are huge numbers. I would not like to believe it, but I can either bullshit myself with the numbers, or in truth, the numbers are a lot less than is currently being published. You see, the problem with all this stuff, which I actually find funny about this, is that the Russians say they killed 200,000 Ukrainians. But the Ukrainian side says we killed 200,000 Russians. And who's really speaking the truth? So Russia has lost 500 tanks, 600 tanks. No, that's according to Ukrainians. No, the Russians say Ukrainians we have wiped out more than 1,000 or 2,000 tanks already. None of these are actually proven. None of these are actually confirmed. None of them are actually official figures. Even if the Russians publicize their own numbers and then publicize what they think the Ukrainians have died, it's still not really credible because they are also guessing, and there are many reasons why they cannot be that accurate. Because sometimes the video footage just don't make sense, or they bombard the place where there's supposed to be a concentration of, say, 30 men. But when the missiles arrive, these guys, it's old information, and they've already left that place, and the building is destroyed for nothing. Empty. But then the Russians might count them as dead. No, not. So there's a lot of fog of war going on in terms of numbers and this. And we, as the commentators, I'm sorry to say, really don't have any clue. And I've said many times, what I don't understand is for these pro-Russian commentators is that they reject the Western media and propaganda until these same media publishes something that they can use and works into their favor, and then they quote these newspapers. So who says that information was true as well or not? I don't understand that. In any case, we will still hear a lot about Bakhmut. Bakhmut, when it turns, it will create a turning point in the war. Why? Because that's the place where most of the forces are being destroyed. Those are the main so-called logistical fortification. Once that falls, it will have a moral impact or impact on the morale of the troops. I believe the rest of the defensive lines will start to crumble because then sort of encircle movement of the Russians, by the Russians of the Ukrainian forces can start, whether they move to the north or to the south, and then finally liberate and hopefully get the Ukrainian forces far away from the Donetsk city, so the Donetsk city doesn't suffer every day of bombardment and so on. One also has to look at what are the Russians trying to achieve. And they said they want to protect they want to cover the oblasts, or the oblasts are now part of Russia. Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk. But the problem is Donetsk sits very near to the border of its own oblast. Well, not far away. So they have to conquer a significant ground in order to, if they would stop, then that border is far away from the city that the Ukrainians cannot bombard them. So that's why I believe that the Russians will have to move up to the Dnieper River in any case, whether they want it or not. Because if there's if there's any peace agreement, forget about it. There is no peace agreement. Not at this stage. Not until Russia has moved to the west, or the west of Ukraine, or NATO and America has decided, no, that's not going to work anymore. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you look, and I'm still again referring to the Boston strategy. There's no ways that Ukraine can win Russia. Russia, at the end of the day, will win the war. Because the only question is, how much is Russia prepared to pay for that victory? And how much is Ukraine prepared to pay for the defeat? The Ukrainians are prepared to sacrifice a lot of men. Russia is not prepared to sacrifice their men unnecessarily. They will sacrifice their men, but not unnecessarily. And therefore, they are continuing with this limited military, slowly destroying the Ukrainian forces. And once at that point, they will move forward. And in this process, they will lose some men, but they are prepared to lose that. So at the end of the day, the price that Russia will finally pay for its occupation is a lot less than anticipated by the Western forces or Ukraine. At the end of the day, it's Ukraine that's going to suffer the most. And I'm not sure what that impact will have on the population that remains, especially families and so on. It might turn to become anti-Russian due to losing a family member in the conflict. But that's not what they should be doing. They should actually then blame their own Ukrainian government for allowing it to happen, and especially unnecessarily happening. So, that's my story for today. If you like what you heard, and you haven't done it, subscribe, tell your friends, let your friend subscribe, let's grow the channel a little bit, press the notification button, and leave a comment. And then until next time, cheers.